Welcome to Grow and Expand with S podcast, where we break through limitations, we heal from within, and we step into our highest, most expansive, fulfilled, and happiest lives. Thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast as we warmly welcome Dr. Rebecca Ray. Not only is Beck the #1 star on my vision board, she is also a clinical psychologist, a best-selling author, a bit of a local celebrity on Channel 9, ABC and News Corp. But far greater than that, Beck has guided countless of big picture thinkers reframe their experiences so that they can reach their ultimate potential. Welcome, Beck, and thank you so much for joining me today.
It's so lovely to be here. Sharné, thank you for having me. I really, really love our chats.
Me too. It's been too long, so I'm so happy that you're here. And there's so much that I want to get into today. But I suppose sort of at the start of it, obviously my Grow and Expand with S podcast is all about serving as that bridge for people who, wherever they find themselves today, they have that inner pull, that knowing, that passion, that there's something different or greater that they want to move towards. And then giving them the tools and the practices and the wisdoms and the stories that they need to guide them through that process. Because as you would know, and God knows as I know, that bridge can be so scary, wrought with fear, uncomfortable. And so I suppose that's my first question. You know, why as humans going after something that's ultimately in alignment with our desires, with our wants, with what we are wanting to experience, why is it so damn hard?
It's hard because sometimes the bridge doesn't even exist. So you're talking about a bridge that requires us to be able to conceptualize of a way through, because a bridge is a way through or a way over, or usually not over. We have to go through in order to be able to process things. But for most people, once fear starts speaking, it's a sheer cliff face. There is no bridge, especially if what the change looks like is we're going from something that's familiar to something that's completely unknown and comes with no guarantees. So I think we need to look at perhaps the leap process as something that is initially approached by our brains as this is a death drop.
Yeah, so I get what you're saying. So like in my mind, you know, the convicted lawyer in me goes, the bridge is definitely there. But what you're saying is the person cannot see the bridge. They cannot see the totality of the bridge.
Exactly. They can't perceive the bridge because they don't know what's on the other side of the bridge. Then the bridge actually doesn't even feel like it exists. So we have to start a step before the bridge, which is brains like to do what they've always done because where brains are wired with neural pathways, which is essentially just little neurons tied together. And on those neural pathways travel chemical messages that tell us to do certain things in response to our feelings and our experiences. Now, neural pathways get wired more solidly the more we do something. So in your current reality is made up of a whole series of habits that you do every single day. I think the statistics are about 40% of what we do every single day is done by habit, which means it's essentially done by rote on automatic pilot. And so if you then think about separating from your marriage, or if you think about changing career altogether, or having a baby, or considering whether or not you actually really want to go and start an art studio instead of continuing in your 9-to-5 job, what happens in your brain is it doesn't actually have neural pathways to back that up. So it activates the fear response. And the fear response says, no thanks, because we're good, because familiarity is safe. So then there's a next step to, well, in order to be able to conceptualize of the other side of the bridge, we need to trust that there is a bridge in the first place. So this is where I kind of conceptualize it like the precipice of that bridge is the difference between self-sabotage and self-trust. We can follow fear into behaviors of self-sabotage, which are largely self-protective and avoidant.
Yeah.
Or we can step into self-trust, which is my lifelong lesson. The fact that I fucking cannot stand the concepts of trust and patience, right? I can't stand them. They are my biggest bugbears. And yet, in order to be able to make change, we need to find a way to step into self-trust and patience, because it's self-trust and patience that allows us to conceptualize that a bridge is there and we can walk across it despite not knowing what's on the other side.
Yeah, that's so beautifully well said. And I can totally resonate with you in terms of the trust. Like, trust is something I fucking hate to do. It brings up the most uncomfortable emotions in my chest and in my body. But I definitely found that the mind shift for me between trusting others and the world, which obviously now I've come a far way with that. But when I started out on my journey, that was, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But when I reframed it to, can I trust myself? And when I reflected on past experiences where I had actually trusted myself and my own knowings over the voices and stories of others, and where I did prove to be right in those instances, I could find more power in that. There was more power in self-trust for me over trusting what someone else says.
Yeah.
And then the other point I want to touch on, it's so interesting you say about those neural pathways and essentially not being able to see the bridge and the vision.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me when we just moved to Perth. So we moved to Perth 4 months ago from Queensland.
Yeah.
And my children, when we delivered the message to them, so Leah's 8, Aubrey's 5, and the overwhelmed flight or fright response that it triggered in them, I'm just so lucky and grateful that I got to, obviously I've got the experience, so I picked up that that's what was going on. And initially I kind of didn't know how to deal with that fear, which obviously just leads to negativity. We don't want to go. This is going to be awful, etc. Whereas, had I not had the skills that I had, I probably would have, when it came to them, try to push their comments to the side and like overwrite them. But you know what I did? I said to my husband one night, all we have to do is they can't conceptualize Perth. They can't see a life. Like, they're 8 and 5. They haven't learned what Perth looks like, how the school might look like, and what the experience of going to the beach will be. So we need to create the picture for them through our words and our past experiences, like holidays here, so that they've got something to connect into to give them that pleasure gland almost, or that hope, that they can still self-trust, but they can kind of visualize it. Yeah. And so that was really powerful. I did it and it worked really well. Before I knew it, after about 2 weeks of talking in that manner, they started getting excited about little bits and pieces. And, I suppose the question is, can we do this for ourselves? Is that a step that we can take when we can't see the bridge? What can we do as the first step to allow us to see a little bit that's enough so that we can take that step in self-trust?
Yeah, it's like, can we develop a sales pitch for the vision that we're going to buy into?
That we're going to buy into, being the key, right? Because if you don't buy in, it's useless.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. The buy-in happens when the discomfort of now and our current reality becomes bigger than the discomfort of the unknown. So the buy-in actually happens emotionally, but we can facilitate the emotional processing of that and the emotional buy-in by, yes, getting clear on what the vision looks like. So one of the things about the vision is that oftentimes we know where we want to go, we know what we want it to look like, but we don't actually know all the details in terms of how to make that happen. Yeah. And sometimes, I don't know whether you're the same, but I'm very much an experimenter. And so sometimes most of my change process is a process of data gathering. I simply just have to go and do the thing and feel how it works for me or doesn't work, and then make tweaks from there on. And so the buy-in is very much about, well, I don't want this. I have enough data right now that this reality has either become something that I'm no longer aligned with or something that I've evolved beyond. And so I want to create a new reality for myself. Let's get clear on what the new reality looks like. Some people do that via talking about it. I'm a talker, I'm a verbal processor. So I don't necessarily need to see it. Some people like to see it. So they'll do a vision board, or they'll go and visit Perth, and they'll go and do that. They'll actually have a visual experience of it and a practical experience of it. I'm not a visual person. There's words in my head, so I hear a lot of chatter. So it's helpful for me to say it out loud. And some people like to write it down. And this can be really helpful, because one of the things that can happen if you're driven by the fuel of anxiety, like I am, is that writing things down forces your thoughts to slow down to the speed of your hand. So by writing things down, I actually mean physically handwriting. Now, okay, let's say we do those things and we get the vision clarified. Then after that, what it's about is actually being honest with yourself, this honesty and transparency, where you have conversations with yourself about, yes, there's no guarantees. And that is incredibly uncomfortable. For people with traumatized brains, if I recall, you're also a fellow trauma survivor. So for those of us with traumatized brains, fuck uncertainty. Honestly, we don't do it. We're not available for it. It's not okay. And yet we live in an uncertain world. So unfortunately, we need to get over it. So uncertainty is an incredibly uncomfortable place to be. But the known, when the certainty of the known becomes so uncomfortable, so misaligned, then we can get to the point where we can accept uncertainty via the path of self-trust. So you've got the vision created, then the bridge of self-trust is to simply take the data that you know about yourself that is going to form the foundation of those bridges. What does that data look like?
Yes,
good. The data looks like, what have I done before in terms of big changes that has actually, I've not died, which will be all the big changes that obviously that you've ever made. And then what have been the big changes that I've made that have actually turned out to be the best decisions that I've made, even though it felt like I was blowing up my life at the time. So it's taking what you know about yourself and those emotional muscles that you have already, as well as the things that you've done previously, and you use that data to build the bridge to the vision, because the vision is unpredictable and as yet unknown, even though we know the general outline of it.
Yeah, you've touched on so many points there. My brain's buzzing with like which angle I kind of go in, which is always such a good place to be in, particularly in a podcast. So that's an intentional exercise, right? Like I just want anyone who's listening to this to really understand and know that they have achieved, overcome so much more than they would consciously know listening to this for the first time today. Their skill set, their ability, their inner power, grit, and ability to get creative with their own tool set and skills is limitless compared to what they know when they first start sitting down and intentionally reflecting and writing down those things. When they bring it to light, they will be mind blown by how many times, how many skills. You know, I remember for me, I was like, holy shit, how did I not know this? Well, it's because, one, I didn't get intentional about it. And two, the world tends to just focus on fuck ups and not on positives.
That's right.
So I just wanted to make that point. And then I've got a really interesting question for you, because you focused on what a lot of people do. And you've said what a lot of people say, which is obviously, and I think to date, it is fact. The number one determinator for change is when where you are is the most uncomfortable. It's pain. It's pain that forces us to move.
Yeah.
Do you believe what I believe, Beck, that we can get to a place as a collective where we can be sparked by the pleasure and the vision and the love and the joy and the possibilities before we get to that level of pain? There will obviously be the presence of it. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be human. But is there a stage where we can not fall to rock fucking bottom and burn out before we start forcing ourselves to bridge that gap, where we don't watch our children suffer to such a great extent where, now we've got to kind of do it, but, you know, not too late, but could have been done earlier? Like, is that world that I'm creating in your, you know, education and psychological and science experience, is that going to be possible?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what you're describing is, can we be sparked by being shown an alternative reality to the one that we're currently living? Yes. In fact, so many people make change from that place. It's because they don't actually realize the level of the pain that they're in until they see the alternative reality, because the bridge is not there, right? So they assume that what they know, better the devil you know, what they know is all there is. Even if they know that other people don't live in that way, or other people get to do the things that they really desire to do, then one of the things that our brains tends to do is to go, but here's all the excuses why that's only for other people. It's not for me. It can't happen for me. So I think what you're describing is so much of a springboard to, well, you use the word possibility, which is one of my favorite words. So many people that I see in the work that I do is they come and see me, and not that I've ever framed it like this, I don't think out loud, but it's showing them that possibilities actually exist, that you don't have to get to a point where you're so psychologically unwell that you can't function on a daily basis to then have to change your life, because you don't have a choice. You're coming from a place where, you know, rock bottom is some people operate at that level. And in some psychological struggles like addiction, rock bottom is something that people get very familiar with, and sometimes the bottom drops even further, and that spurs change. So we can't discount that. You know, it depends on what people are going through. Sometimes people need to get to that point before change feels like it's the only way forward. However, for people that are in a place where possibilities are available to them or offered to them, and by offered, I don't mean here's the opportunity of a new job, although sometimes that works. I mean, perhaps there's someone that says, hey, I see this in you, so why isn't it possible for you? Sometimes that's all it needs. Hey, yeah, why isn't it possible for me?
Yeah, that's such a powerful piece, because a lot of people, and again, if you've had trauma, you're not used to people seeing that part in you, activating that part in you, reflecting your positives back, reflecting your potential back, reflecting your opportunities back. And then you can learn to do that yourself. But it's the most powerful thing when someone else who is either has arrived or is further along to where you are headed, when they reflect that back at you. You know, just I'm thinking back now for the first time how powerful those moments have been for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then obviously fear is the thing we deal with, right? Like at the kind of core root of it, we're dealing with fear, and fear represents in the body. It also represents in our mind chatter. And it also obviously exists in, well, it's an energetic field. There's a vibrational energy attached to it. I know that for me, one of the biggest things that helped me, like I first started with the mindset side of it, where when it came to fear, you know, I reframed it from a place of love and expansion, but truth, because I had to be able to buy into it. Because if I can't buy into it, I can't get there. And I also had to understand and delve down to the core limiting belief around that fear, because then that just blows it up, right? You go, oh, is that what I'm worried about? Almost sometimes just seeing it makes it like look laughable.
Yeah.
But really none of that overrides the nervous system response. For me, I could coach myself through it, and I cognitively kept having to do it to obviously be able to move from a lawyer to a growth mindset coach to then a personal growth and energetics coach, to go from being afraid to speaking up to having my own podcast, to going from being, you know, not being able to speak in public to host events that's got women. Like I could coach myself through it from the mind perspective, but I was capped because my body would still react so greatly to it that the work it took for my mind, you know, it became exhausting in itself, I suppose, in summary. Now, I know how I worked through it then in calming my nervous system down, like from a body perspective. But I'd love to hear from you if you've got any insights, tools, wisdoms, practices that you can recommend. Because had I known then what I know now, I would have probably started with the body calming nervous system before the mind work.
Well, you kind of need to. That's right.
Yeah, well, I do. I went about it the hard way, but those are lessons that I can learn now that I can teach.
Yeah, you didn't go about it the hard way. You went about it the way we're sold in Western society. So Western
Yeah.
society sells us a cognitive way of approaching our problems. It's cerebral. So it's just in your mind. If only you could think positively, then you'd be okay. Bullshit. Okay? We don't work like that here. And also it's just not possible, especially if you tend towards overthinking and people pleasing and shame spiraling and all those things. Just being able to show yourself a nice, pretty vision is not going to work. When the
No.
fear is activated, it's got legs to it. And those legs look like shame and fear of rejection and fear of abandonment and fear of failure and anything else that we attach to globally being defective or not good enough and therefore not belonging. So, what we're ultimately doing is we're working on our relationship with ourselves to build the strength of that relationship to then go back to self-trust. You cannot have self-trust without having a strong relationship with yourself. And I disagree with myself. So
That's good. I love disagreeing with ourselves because that's where we
yeah.
grow. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, now that I say that out loud, I disagree because self-trust is built by doing the thing, right? People that say you've just got to be confident, you've just got to believe in yourself. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work. I wish it did because my job would be much easier. And also my mind would be much easier to deal with. Self-belief and self-trust are actually built by allowing yourself to take a step toward the bridge and then walking across it. And that's how we build this strength of relationship. So you don't need, it's like there's a saying that goes around that you can only love other people as much as you love yourself. Oh,
100%.
bullshit.
No,
Absolute bullshit.
I disagree.
Yes, I very much disagree with that. So if you think of your relationship with yourself as a lifelong practice, the same way that any intimate relationship is a lifelong practice, however long you're in that relationship for, or parenting, we're always practicing, then one of the things that we're working on with that response that you're describing is being able to address the physiological aspects of it and then the emotional aspects of it, because there's two parts to the nervous system.
Yes.
It's physiological reaction of the nervous system and then the emotional reaction. And if you don't deal with that, it doesn't matter how much mindset work you do, it will always feel superficial if you haven't dealt with the depth of it. So you're completely on track there with that. I'm not going to go down that path because I'm pretty sure our listeners will know how to manage their breathing and how to do grounding techniques, right? You can Google that. They're simple and they're meant to be simple for a reason. What I'd rather give our listeners is something slightly more advanced right now. And that's that the practice then becomes one of being on your own side. So once you've done the grounding work of your nervous system, down regulation, we call it clinically, essentially you're just calming yourself down in your body and your emotions, then yes, it's about your mindset. But what the fuck do we mean by mindset? Essentially, especially if you have a traumatized brain like we do. So people have let you down in the past. Adults were unsafe when you were a child. You've been through stuff that has left you with wounds that you need to carry and manage on a daily basis. Then one of the hardest things that you'll learn as an adult, that it was never your fault, you are not bad, and you're not doing anything wrong. And then second to that is you're allowed to desire the reality that you want.
That's a big piece. I'm getting
yes.
goosebumps.
So the link between those two is, how would I act if I actually had my own back? What would this look like if I was to be on my own side here? Now, I've used that language intentionally because if I ask our listeners to fucking stand in front of a mirror and say, I love you, they're going to roll their eyes and go, yeah, thanks very much. No. Because sometimes that's way too much of a leap for people that have a relationship with themselves that has been scarred by people who have harmed them. So instead, if we think about it, if we're on our own team, what do we do? What would we do? What would be possible? What would be allowed? Now, there's some loaded language there, especially allowed. And I'm not saying that someone can listen to a 30-minute podcast
No.
from us today and then walk
No.
away and do this thing.
No.
This takes work and practice, but that's the most powerful place that we can, that's the most powerful direction we can head in terms of buy into the vision.
So absolutely. And that permission to desire is such a big piece, because I know the shame I've had to release to give myself the permission to desire, to dream bigger, want more, and take up my own space and love myself for it. So I really loved that. I want to go back to you saying that you think it's bullshit loving yourself. The saying, you can only love others as deep as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Because I cannot disagree with you more based on my own experience. And so I can only come at it from my own experience, right?
Yeah.
And let me take you on the journey, but then perhaps what it is going to be at the end of the day is just a different language that we put to the same thing, and perhaps not. And that's okay too. All things are welcome here, because obviously everyone relates to things differently.
Yeah.
When I started my journey, it started with inner child healing, which for me really looked like meeting myself and allowing myself to acknowledge that what happened wasn't my fault. What happened was never because I was bad. What happened wasn't because I was too much or doing anything wrong. It happened because of other people and their choices and stories. And that in itself gave me this permission to grieve. So I grieved like nobody's bloody fucking business for months and months. But in that depth of grieving that I did, holding my inner self, who I couldn't look at to start with, I couldn't visualize her. I couldn't hug her in my visualizations. I was cold. I was disconnected towards the end, where I was holding her and I was, I could sort of see myself rubbing her hair, and that connection grew so much bigger and deeper. And that compassion and that love that grew, like the ability for me throughout that process and how I showed up for my children was that colder, more distant mother to the warm mother. And for me, that's where that saying started, that I will only be able to show up and love someone to the depth that I've met myself. And, because to start with, whatever pain I was carrying that they were projecting onto me, I was blocking the same way to them as I was internally. And as that dissolved on the inner, it just dissolved in the outer. And so that's why I say that. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. One of the things that I think is so much easier to do is to love our little selves than to love our adult today self, because we hold our adult today self to usually such unrelenting and unrealistic expectations that loving that version of ourselves can seem far less achievable. So the reason I have such strong feelings against it, like I have such strong feelings about people being told to just think positive, is because if we automatically set people up for failure, then they're going to feel even worse about themselves. So you're actually asking them to do something that seems so distant from where they are. You're giving them no hope. And I honestly think that, especially in today's climate, economically and politically, we need hope. Hope is medicinal. And when it comes to our relationship with ourselves, we need hope that it is possible to alter that relationship to something that's a little bit more gentle and a little bit more cushioned, and perhaps even one day a joyful thing. So in terms of the love language, I don't have an issue with the love language. When you get to the point that you can say you love yourself, great, excellent. I have an issue with where we start with that language.
Love that. Yeah, totally get that.
There's nuance to the process. If someone is at a place where they are so critical of themselves, then I actually start with exactly where you started. It's introducing themselves to an age of themselves that feels more acceptable. And oftentimes that child is 3 or they're 6. I've worked with a client this week who used to be left as a child in her bedroom. And when she had chronic insomnia, she was only 7 and her parents wouldn't let her out of her bedroom. So if she couldn't sleep, she would lie there feeling absolutely terrified in the dark, sometimes awake until 2 a.m.
And alone. I mean, under that is alone, right?
it's underneath that is I am alone in the world and there is something wrong with me, so that the people that should love me didn't come to me and didn't give me that support. And so when we look at, okay, let's look at 7-year-old you lying in that bed, it's much easier for her to go, oh, you poor kid, and to visualize what that's like and then speak to that child the way that child needed to be spoken to. Sometimes I think this is the biggest lesson we learn when we become parents, but we become parents who are cycle breakers. Many people become parents and they don't have capacity to be cycle breakers or insight or skills or willingness. But for those of us that are cycle breakers, we can hear the way that we were spoken to and we refuse to do the same. And yet, because we're imperfect, oftentimes we do. And then we have to work through the shame spiral that happens
Well,
there.
correct. Because if you were critically spoken to when you were a child,
Yes.
As an adult, you'll be speaking critically to yourself, but you'll also have that self-image that you deserve it and etc. But you'll also be speaking critically to others. And so it's just such a big body of work and piece. But inner child healing for me is, if I could have one message for the whole world, from my honest truth, it is inner child healing is the thing that heals, that would heal the world. I reckon if everyone, the presidents, everyone sort of politics, if people just did inner child healing, that compassion, that empathy, that connection, that love that is born from there, is where the journey started and ended for me. Because you can't have, once you do it here, it naturally becomes and sort of embeds into the woman I am today, because I realize I'm one and the same. And then all of a sudden I find myself being compassionate with myself. And I found myself being, using the language like, yeah, of course you're not perfect. No one is. Oh, yeah, that's right. And do you know what I mean? It's just such a beautiful body of work that I just am so incredibly passionate about. And then I've got probably a really big question for you, and whether you want to put your own story and experience to it or not, that's totally up to you. But thinking back to a time where you were at that cliff, right? So you were at the cliff, and you would know just how vulnerable that is, no matter what skills we have, no matter what experiences we've got, what tools we have in our toolkit. Even today when I reach those cliffs, it's just the vulnerability and the fear can feel so overwhelming. Thinking back to a time for you where that, you found yourself there, what are the top 2 to 3 things that you actually used to get you through?
I've been through, I'm a professional scaredy cat. So I just go from cliff to cliff. Really, that's how my life runs. I think the things that have helped me most have been constantly nurturing my relationship with myself. I am a very different human today because of how I am internally with myself than how I used to be, especially say in my 20s when I drove myself into the ground so my body broke down. Also did that in my 30s. I'm a slow learner, but hey, we got there in the end. Still getting there, still a practice. But the second thing is, so relationship with myself, and I honestly believe that inner child working is the same stuff. It's all how we meet ourselves, learning to meet yourself in a different way. That's the biggest key, in accompaniment with the fact that I surround myself with what I call the wise counsel. So I have an inner circle of remarkable women. There's a couple of men too, who are highly intelligent and attuned and intuitive. And sometimes when I'm in my head, which is a lot of the time, and I can't get out of it, the wise counsel is the difference between me spiraling and me being able to catch myself in the fall. And in fact, we did that just before we started that podcast, when I spoke about an experience that I had this morning where someone criticized me publicly and it threw me for a loop. So sometimes when you're with psychologically safe people and you allow them to help you. Now, one of my trauma responses is hyper independence. I don't do help. Thanks very much. I don't need it. I'm just good over here alone. Thank you.
And I can't trust it. I can't trust it.
I can't trust it. No.
Yeah.
and I won't be able to pay it back enough because I don't
Yeah,
deserve help.
okay.
So the learning to be vulnerable, to then nurture that circle. One of the things that's happened is there's a lot of reciprocity in that circle. And so I very much have a lot of data that as much as I use the circle uses me. And I don't use is probably the wrong word.
No, I know what you mean.
Yes, it's reciprocal. So
You're
it's
each
going
other's
through this.
abundance. You're each other's
Yes.
abundance and gifts.
Yes. So in a word, if we're going to place all of that in a word, it's just connection. It's connection with myself in a certain way, and it's connection with my people who are my chosen family. Yeah.
And that's such a big piece. I mean, that's probably a whole separate podcast, that connection with other people. It's not other people, it's connection with the right other people.
Yes, that's
and
right.
like, I'll tell you that is something that I'm in the new season now of
Yeah.
starting to learn the lessons and starting to create and calling in and opening myself up for the opportunity, but from someone who's gone through the hurt and the abuse and the pain that was caused by those that has loved me most. And I know they've loved me to the capacity that they've had, but that was fucking insufficient, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Like, I just, in the past, surrounded myself, number one, only with people who thought like me. So there was this gap in my journey where obviously they doubted me and what I'm doing. They try to drag me back, and not intentionally, it's unintentionally. They're projecting their fears, their limitations, their beliefs. And like, that was the hardest part, because I have this inner knowing, because I'd done enough of the work to know, because once you know, you know. But
Yeah.
it's about whether you're going to let the fear win or you're going to let your knowing win. When the fear represents the people you've surrounded yourself with and build your community around, and the people you love to the base that you can love, and you've got to cut that off. And it's not even an intentional cutoff. It happens naturally. I didn't turn to one person and say, I don't want you in my circle. I'm desperate for them to stay in my circle, which is probably a little thing in itself, but they don't want to come. It's not their jam, and they drain me. So then I go and approach them less. And I'm probably in that in-between space at the moment, where I'm just starting here in Perth now to open up to, oh, there's some powerful women I've already met. And when you can see someone that's either where you're at or a little bit further ahead in the direction that you're heading and where you want to go, that's the piece, surrounding yourself with them.
Yes.
That was a rant, sorry.
The other thing that I thought of as you were saying that is, we're also sold a lie that the people that we move through life with evolve at the same pace and should be friends forever. That's not true. Human beings are very complex. And so we often put pressure on ourselves that we should still be friends with people from school, or we feel pressured if someone reaches out to us from a certain chapter of our life that now makes us feel icky that we don't want to go back to. There is a reason for that. People evolve and grow at different stages and in different speeds, and we have to honor that. And sometimes that means letting people go so that they can do what they need to do and they can be who they want to be, and also honor what you want to do and who you want to be. That speed thing and just the levels that we reach doesn't make anyone wrong.
No.
It just means that we acknowledge that when the energy can't be matched or we can't be met in a way that honors ourselves, that's data.
That's data, and that is honestly the piece I'm the worst at. Like, giving that a level of advice, I have no advice to give, because that part of me that wants to hold on for dear life, and I've got one relationship specifically I'm thinking of at the moment, and my love for this person is so deep, but I don't want to go where you are. I'll never go back. I'll never come back. I can't. It's like, I'm way too far past that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to drag you up because it's so painful every time we meet, and one of us has to make a bridge. Well, you know, like, one of us has to come up or down. And because I ain't coming fucking down, I'm pulling you up, and I can see I'm hurting you. Sharné, sitting here in front of you, Beck, today, last week, I can see that I'm hurting you. So not only now am I hurting myself, depriving myself of other relationships that could nurture me, I can also see the person I love, I'm hurting. I can see I'm taking from you. I can see I'm stretching you beyond your limits, but I don't want to let go. I just, with this person, don't want to let go. And I honored that part in me too, you know. It's that tenacious, feisty, little Sharné that's gotten here because I had
Yes.
that and I didn't let go. But obviously, I've learned that I have to manage her and talk with her, and we have to work together in towards where we're headed.
Yes, absolutely. And also don't judge yourself for not letting go, because letting go is one of the hardest things that we ever do. And I'm not even sure that I love the language of letting go because for trauma survivors in particular, it can be incredibly invalidating language because it somehow implies that the fact that you're holding on to something means you're defective or you're the problem. And you have to let go in order to heal or to get to the other side. Neither of those things are true. The same way that I don't fully buy into the fact that we need to forgive people in order to move on. We have choices around these things. And sometimes when it comes to letting go, it's about accepting that A, we have timing when it comes to healing, and that timing doesn't always work in a linear fashion. And B, that sometimes we're just not emotionally ready. You can't force a particular emotional process.
No, you can't.
And yet we're also sold that lie because we're in a first world country that gives us 10 sessions with a psychologist per calendar year. So people come with an expectation that we should be able to fix things in a very time limited way. Many things we can. But when we're talking about things that have been with us for a very long time and created wounds that are sometimes reopened, those wounds don't care about whatever our calendar says.
Yeah, the calendar that we made at some point in time.
The calendar that we made, yeah. We just made it up. It's arbitrary, but also we can hold pain by saying, yes, the pain is there, and also it's not driving today.
Yeah, beautiful, powerful. Beck, this was better than I expected, if that's even possible.
Thanks for having me, Sharné. I really appreciate it. I love chatting to you.
Thank you so, so much, Beck. Your wisdoms and insights. You're a powerful, powerful woman, and so grateful for you coming on the podcast today.
Thank you.